Did you know climate change is affecting your house insurance? Let's unpack this. Climate change is an increasingly urgent issue, and its effects are felt far and wide. For those living in coastal cities, the threat is even more imminent. Rising sea levels, intensifying storms, and unpredictable weather patterns are not only endangering lives and infrastructure, but they're also significantly impacting house insurance. Consider this. A study by the First Street Foundation finds that nearly 39 million properties across the United States are vulnerable to climate-related disasters. And here's the kicker. A quarter of these properties may be overvalued when you factor in the risks posed by climate change. That's a sobering thought, isn't it? The implications, particularly for house insurance, are profound. As risks increase, so do insurance premiums, making it more difficult for homeowners, particularly those in low-income brackets, to secure adequate coverage. In fact, some homes are becoming too costly to insure at all. This is not just an issue for homeowners, but for all of us. As our communities become more vulnerable to the impacts of climate change, the economic toll on coastal cities and their residents is rapidly increasing. There's an urgent need for action, to protect our communities, to ensure fair and equitable access to insurance coverage, and to safeguard our future. So as we delve deeper into this topic, remember, as we'll see, the situation is particularly critical in certain regions. Let's turn our attention to Florida, a state feeling the brunt of climate change. Florida is often referred to as the Sunshine State, but it's increasingly becoming the submerged state. With over 20 million residents, Florida is no stranger to the threats of climate change, particularly sea level rise. You see, Florida's peninsula is almost entirely at or near sea level. This makes it incredibly vulnerable to even the slightest rise in sea level. And, unfortunately, these rises aren't slight. The state has seen sea levels rise by nearly 8 inches since the early 20th century, and they're only forecasted to rise even further. Now you might be thinking, surely Florida's homeowners are prepared for this. Sadly, that's not always the case. Many buyers, especially those from out of state, are often unaware of the flood risks associated with their new homes. Many properties are inadequately insured, leaving homeowners in a precarious position when disaster strikes. In fact, it's estimated that over 2 million properties in Florida are at risk of flooding by the end of this century. To put that into perspective, that's more than 10% of all properties in the state. But the problem doesn't stop with the homeowners. Flood insurance companies are also feeling the heat. As the risk of flooding increases, so does the cost of insuring against it. Many insurance companies are finding it increasingly difficult to justify offering affordable rates in such high-risk areas. This, in turn, leaves homeowners with fewer options and higher bills. And let's not forget the human element. These aren't just statistics, these are people's homes, their livelihoods. The emotional and financial toll of losing a home to flooding is unimaginable. But this is not just an American problem. The impacts of climate change and the subsequent rise in house insurance premiums are being felt across the globe. From Miami to Melbourne, coastal cities worldwide are grappling with the same issues. But as we'll see in our next segment, this is a problem that has solutions if we're willing to work for them. On the other side of the globe, Australia is grappling with similar challenges. This vast continent is surrounded by a coastline that stretches over 25,000 miles, making it particularly susceptible to the effects of climate change. Now, let's consider the numbers. According to recent studies, over 5.8 million properties in Australia are at risk from rising sea levels and increased storm activity. These hazards, such as coastal erosion and storm surge, threaten to diminish the value of homes, displace communities, and dramatically increase the cost of insurance. In fact, some places are already feeling the heat. In the coastal town of Byron Bay, for instance, beachfront properties are literally crumbling into the sea due to severe erosion. But it's not just the homeowners who are feeling the pinch. Insurance companies are also under pressure as they struggle to balance the increasing risks with affordable premiums. Many insurers are being forced to raise their rates, making it harder for homeowners to protect their most valuable assets. And here's the kicker. As climate change accelerates, these problems are only going to get worse. According to climate scientists, sea levels around Australia could rise by up to 3 feet by the end of this century. As these risks grow, so too does the cost of insuring our homes. This situation calls for urgent action, not just from governments and insurers, but also from homeowners themselves. It's time to face the rising tide. FEMA's updated flood risk assessment is a testament to the growing threat. This isn't just a statement, It's an alarm bell ringing for homeowners in coastal cities. With the escalating threat of climate change, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA, has had to reconsider its flood risk assessment. The result? Higher insurance premiums. Now you might be wondering, why would that be the case? Well, as the risk of flood damage increases due to rising sea levels and more intense storms, insurance companies have to adjust their rates to cover potential losses. This means that homeowners, especially those in high-risk coastal areas, have to shoulder the burden of these rising insurance costs. Unfortunately, this isn't a burden that can be easily borne by all. For low-income and minority homeowners, these increased premiums can make their homes too costly to insure. This is not just about numbers and percentages. It's about families who may lose the safety net of insurance. It's about communities that may find themselves unable to rebuild after a disaster. In fact, the National Association of Insurance Commissioners reports that insurance premiums have been rising by an average of 5.3% each year, and this trend is set to continue through 2040. That's a significant increase that could push many homeowners to the brink. But here's the thing, while these rising premiums reflect the increasing risks posed by climate change, they also highlight a glaring issue in our society: the inequality gap. Those with less are being hit the hardest. They are the ones who will suffer the most from these rising costs, and they are the ones who are least able to afford them. This is a wake-up call. We need to address the impacts of climate change not just on our environment, but also on our economy and our society. We need to take action to ensure that insurance remains accessible and affordable for all homeowners, regardless of their income or ethnicity. As premiums rise, so too does the financial strain on homeowners. But remember, this isn't just about insurance. This is about people's lives, their homes, and their futures. The economic toll on coastal cities is staggering. As we grapple with the reality of climate change, the need for immediate, decisive action has never been more critical. Our coastal cities are on the front line of this global crisis, with homes, livelihoods, and entire communities at risk. The rising sea levels, intensifying storms, and escalating insurance premiums are not distant threats. They are present, pressing issues that demand our attention. The implications of climate change reach beyond the physical destruction of properties. It is also about the financial devastation it can cause to homeowners. As we've discussed, insurance premiums are on the rise, and for many the cost of insuring their homes is becoming prohibitively expensive. This disproportionately affects low-income and minority homeowners, who are often the most vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. The time has come for us to rethink our approach to housing in coastal cities. We cannot continue to ignore the risks posed by climate change. We need to ensure that every homeowner, regardless of their income or ethnicity, has access to affordable insurance coverage. This is not just a matter of fairness, but a necessity for the resilience and survival of our coastal communities. We must also advocate for policies that take into account the realities of climate change. Legislation that encourages sustainable building practices, supports the development of resilient infrastructure, and promotes equitable access to insurance can be a game changer. But this fight is not just for policymakers and town planners. We all have a role to play. Staying informed about the impacts of climate change, understanding the risks to our homes and communities, and being proactive in our response are vital. The challenge is immense, but so too is the opportunity for change. We can reshape our future, make our cities more resilient, and ensure that every homeowner can protect their property without being burdened by unaffordable insurance costs. Subscribe for more insights on climate change and its impacts on coastal cities. Together, we can work towards a sustainable future.